Hello everyone, I'm Leah Eum from class 5 and today I'm going to be presenting about Korean diasporas from the movies Minari and Pachinko. So table of contents. So what is diaspora? And I'm going to introduce you to diasporas from Minari and Pachinko, and last but not least, crew members of Pachinko. So what is diaspora? Diaspora is basically people settled far from their ancestral homelands, who actually left their homelands and moved to another country or another region. So the first, let me introduce about diasporas from Minari. Before I dive into an explanation about diasporas from Minari, I'm going to real quickly tell you about the movie Minari itself. So Minari has its world premiere at the Sundance Film Festival on January 26, 2020, winning both the U.S. Dramatic Grand Jury Prize and the U.S. Dramatic Audience Award. So it won a lot of different awards in America and especially in the U.S. So I've also watched it and I felt a lot about it. So the key point of this movie is that the growing relationship between David and his grandma highlights the important difference between being Asian diaspora and from Asia, because the David, who is the little boy you can see on the poster, is typical Asian like diaspora, and Grandma Sonja was just came from Asia, so during a difficult period in history of Asians worldwide. So this movie is a story of first generation of Korean American immigrants. So in my personal thinking, the reason why this movie was so highlighted, especially in the US, is because it may be fresh for them in that it is a movie that calmly and painfully conveyed the life of the first generation of Korean immigrants to American society, which not could be rooted as easily as the Minari seeds as grandmother brought from Korea. So this is because the first generation of immigrants to Korea, which Americans think is often recognized as people who have a desire to send children to Ivy League and type universities while running a grocery store or laundry. So it might be they might have always see Asian immigrants as ambitious people, rather than focusing on their stories. But this movie not just describes a single Korean family beautifully. So I guess I might have fresh for Americans especially. And diasporas from Pachinko. So Pachinko is a story of four generations of Koreans living in Japan from 1910s to 1980s. So Sonja is the main character as a woman born in Japanese colonial era Joseon who follows her missionary husband to Japan. So she went to she went to Japan around 1910 to 1920 during a Japanese colonial era, and she had no idea about Japan and didn't know a single word of Japanese at that time. And Mojasu in Japan, pachinko is a national entertainment, but it's also a dark business that is criticized as gambling. Korean residents in Japan jumped into a business that the Japanese thought was dirty, so Korean residents in Japan had to do what the Japanese wouldn't do. So pachinko was one of the businesses Japanese wouldn't do, and Mojasu is a man who's doing a pachinko business. And Solomon, he moved to America in order to avoid discrimination. He got into a nice company to work, having a nice status and position in U.S. society. So he is maintaining his real great status and position around U.S. society. I think he is a single and only character who got that kind of position in this movie. And the crew members of Pachinko. As I researched this presentation, one thing that I was really surprised was that like all of the crew members of Pachinko, like most of the crew members of Pachinko is composed of people who were once have experienced being immigrants, or have an experience moving into different country. For example, the heading producer, who is Soo-hyu, her Korean name is Ho Soo-jin, is an American television writer, producer, and showrunner. She is the one who you can see the middle of this picture right here. And directors are Koko Nada, who is South Korean-born American filmmaker, and Justin Chun, a Korean-American actor. And executive producer is Teresa Kang. And she is a Korean as well, and she works at WME, which is America's top movie industry company. So she is a producer there. And the author of Pachinko is also really famous author. She's my favorite. Her name is Min Jin Lee. She is Korean American author and journalist based in Harlem, Manhattan. Her work frequently deals with Korean and Korean American topics. So Soo-hyu's once said that there were many Korean Americans and Koreans among the production team. She said, "I gained a sense of belonging through this work." I think this was the key point of this movie, is that the movie really requires like a high budget, and it requires a high amount of money, since it requires 4 languages spoken, actors, and 4 different countries to shoot, and it's really huge scale. But the reason why this movie was able to be released is that the crew members and also all the production teams, they were all together, but they all sensed a belonging through this work, and it's their own stories. That's why this Pachinko could be made up. Last but not least, I'm gonna tell you about the Korean international movie industry. Just like I showed you the movie Pachinko and Minari, the Korean movie industries are growing in the field of international academy, as like especially recently, as you can see, Yoon Ye-jung and Steven Yeun, Sandra Oh from Grey's Anatomy, and Bong Joon-ho, his movie Parasite. And this, like, the development of Korean international movie industry not only means the development of Korean cultural development, but also means that the people who are like in color, or like Asians, they are like, the society is getting more susceptible about like Asian cultures, and this has a lot to say with racial discrimination and racial recognition around the society. So and also like the success of the movie, which is dealing with like diaspora and immigrants. I think that's the reason why that movie was successful, was because like so many people around the world actually sympathized and understood the feeling of being immigrants, since there are so many immigrants around the world. So I'm really rooting for and hoping and eager to see more of the success of Korean international movie industry down the road. And thank you for listening to my presentation. Thank you.